Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 3 of the No Frills Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Camp, and tonight's episode is Mindful Journey featuring Adam James. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my guest this evening, Adam James. Adam joins us today from Naples, Florida. He's the founder and CEO of Mindful Journey, a web-based platform used by organizations nationwide to help employees take care of their mental health well-being. For over a decade, he has captivated audiences with his personal story of overcoming the odds and has shared his teachings on stages ranging from TEDx to Fortune 500 companies. In addition to his professional experiences, he's an NCAA Division I men's basketball official, and let's welcome him with a warm welcome, if you will, tonight, instead of the usual booze that he's accustomed to as a referee. So we'll go easy on you tonight, Adam. Ladies and gentlemen, my very special guest, Adam James. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joe. So nice to be with you and appreciate the warm welcome. And of course, love that you said no booze. I am very, very used to that. So we'll pretend there's an applause that I'm hearing right now.
There is. But listen, this is the No Frills Teacher Podcast. I can't afford special effects and sounds like booze and things like that and cheers. So we'll just pretend they're there, like you said.
Amazing.
So once again, yes, thank you. I'm very excited about this episode. And the reason why is, can get into, who you are and what you do and all the wonderful things, with Mindful Journey. But what I'm most excited about is really part of the theme of tonight's episode is talking about mental wellness and health. And we'll get into all of that. But I feel, especially since this podcast, the average listener seems to be in the education field, we're really at a time right now in the profession where there's such, I feel, a big focus on mental wellness, not only for our students, but for educators as well. And I think this is a great tie-in on what you do as a professional, and then how it can help support and educators and how we can find things that are relatable. So, Adam, really, my first question is, tell us a little bit about yourself, the background, and what exactly is Mindful Journey, and we'll kind of go into mental wellness and kind of like I just touched upon how that ties into what you do and support. Is There's so much to talk about. Let's just get started.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for having me. And obviously, mental health well-being is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. Mindful Journey, to give you an overview and answer to your question. It's a web-based platform. It serves as a preventive resource that organizations deploy for their team members that have at their disposal to log into, to find hope, to be inspired, to learn skills. It's really not designed to be what is so often in the educational space and in corporate America, in EAP, Employee Assistance Program. We're wanting to infuse hope into people's lives because not everyone is dealing with a clinically diagnosable mental health illness. And even if they are, not every moment requires a therapy type solution. Sometimes people just need a glimmer of hope to get on, to the next day, to get on to the next moment. And particularly as it relates to education, to kind of bring this full circle, Joe, for your listeners, I have a soft spot in my heart for the educational world. As you know, because that's how we met, I was a teacher for 1 year, studied education in college. So I'm very aware of the demands that teachers have day in and day out because I lived it. And I do believe that now more than ever, teachers, in order for them to show up at their very, very best, they need to be taking care of self. And from my experiences, and I don't know this fully, but the resources that have been in place have primarily been those EAP, more reactive type of things where teachers might not feel compelled to engage with it because they might get found out, that somebody might know that they engage with it, and thus they'll fear that somebody thinks they're, quote unquote crazy, which is part of the stigma that comes with mental health. So I do believe more programs like Mindful Journey are needed for teachers because, as you know, and you're such an effective and great teacher, as you know, though, Joe, when you've probably shown up at your best, it's because you've been taking care of self. If you're not the best you, you can't best serve your students.
And that's, I think that is perfectly said. And you do have to take care of yourself. And thank you, by the way, for the compliment. That means a great deal to me. I do feel like, when you're on your game, so to speak, whether
Mm.
you're an athlete or you're a professional, you're an educator and you go and you have this amazing day at work, this amazing lesson. But oftentimes we're dealing with so much stress in our own personal lives, whatever reason, finances, marital, whatever it may be,
Mm.
relationship wise, that we go to work and we bring that baggage with us. And it is
Mhm.
obvious. I mean, I'm guilty of that over, my 20 years now in education, that there are days that I was dealing with stuff that outside of work that I just, as much as I wanted to focus and be there, I just, my mind was somewhere else. And you're right about the EAPs and all those things. Like I personally was not aware of any resources beyond, okay, maybe you could schedule. And if you do schedule, you have only so many sessions to speak to someone. And I feel like there's such a need in our country today for that advocacy of mental health and mental wellness. Is that something that you see as well?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I wake up every day doing, mindful journey. I know you know a little bit about it now, but that's exactly what it's designed to do is to be a resource that doesn't just sit idly, but gets imbued into a culture in a way where leaders are rallying around it and it becomes a part of the DNA of the organization, be it the educational sector or not. Because what happens too often in education and in corporate America, in my opinion, is that there's such a stigma attached to mental health, and thus the resources that are in play intentionally sit idly so that folks, feel more confident, comfortable engaging with them. But what happens is if there's not a cultural shift and people don't feel talking about their feelings and feel, comfortable talking about their challenges and shortcomings and being vulnerable, then they're not going to engage with that stuff anyway. So mindful journey is designed to, the word manipulation is strong because that's not what we're trying to do, but we're intentionally bringing something to the forefront of people's minds. For instance, through guest interviews that I have, which kind of are like podcasts, I ask every guest, what's the most challenging thing you've gone through in your life? And what do you recall having done to get through it? The intention behind that question is to let listeners recognize that we're human, all of us. And from what I've seen out in the market, most programs don't exist that way. It's very much like, the tagline will be, oh, are you depressed? Are you anxious? Are you feeling hopeless? Are you broken? Not literally, they don't ask that question, but it's positioned to say, are you broken? Oh, come seek help. And nobody seeks help. So mindful journey is saying, okay, let's change the narrative so that we embrace the conversation in such a way where we're creating trust at a level where folks are feeling comfortable talking about their own shortcomings. So I'll pause there. As you can tell, and your listeners can probably feel throughout this conversation, I get passionate about this, but the short answer to your question is yes. Like there is absolutely a need in education and everywhere else, in my opinion, for more preventive resources and not just, these EAPs.
Yeah. Do you find working with corporate America and you have, the TEDx and these Fortune 500 companies, are organizations just becoming more self-aware of the need for supporting employees versus maybe how it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Seems like I said, there's this shift in our society now where we're more mindful, play on words, mindful journey, but
Hmm.
pay more attention to, one's mental well-being. And when you are working with these corporations and these companies, is it like a company retreat or do they ask you to come out? Because I know you do the motivational speaking as well. How does that go about? Like, what does that look like?
So in 2013, I, took a dive in the deep end to start motivational speaking leadership training company that really transformed into a consultancy of sorts where I began immersing myself into organizational culture to learn about industry pain points and how we could not only just improve performance, but, boost morale internally, make leaders more effective, make people happier in a work environment. When 2020 arose, that's when I shifted a bit and, worked to build out Mindful Journey. And with Mindful Journey, when implementing, you know, one of the things that I'm doing on the front end of that implementation experience is coming on site. Not always. I've served clients all throughout the country. So in some occurrences, it's not possible or they don't desire it. I'll do a Zoom with the leadership team, but trying to add value on the front end of the experience that is motivational in nature to try to reach their hearts, if you will, and then kind of give the overview of Mindful Journey, what it is, best practices to embed it into the culture. And each leader's a little different. So it's tough to, to answer in terms of I know you didn't ask specifically, is there a shift? But yeah, I do think there is. You kind of hinted at that. There is a shift, but you really, the right type of leader needs to not just buy a program like a Mindful Journey, whatever it is. This isn't meant to be self-promotion, whatever the program may be, but to then drive it and then continue to talk about it day after day after day, like a mission, a vision, and a set of core values. Just like at your school district, you may even know what the vision statement is.
Yeah.
Those things shouldn't just be there just to be there. In order for you to feel connected to the culture, that can't be lip service. That has to be lived and breathed every single day.
And once again, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's that kind of cultural, change, that our lens, like, how do we, it's that paradigm shift, if you will, to quote, Stephen Covey, like we need that paradigm shift of like, we saw things one way and now we see things a different way. And now I got to say, I want to kind of go back a little bit further. You had mentioned about 2013, all that, but for you yourself, you're a very fascinating person as I, got to know you and get to continue to know you even more, you know, over these past few years. Your personal journey, you've had your own trials and tribulations, starting as early as when you were, up to 4 years old, right? If I'm not mistaken, you really weren't very vocal. Is that true? And then, fast forward, you had your struggles of what at one point you were living in your car. And can you give us a little bit of a background of like who Adam James is? And if you don't mind sharing, of course, your own challenges, because for you to go
Mhm.
from what you had faced and the adversity you had faced in your life to making it your life's work and your vision and mission to go and support others out there. It's pretty remarkable, the story of Adam James. So, would you be so kind to give us a little bit more of a background on who you are?
Of course, yeah. And thank you for your kind words. So, yeah, Joe. So, I didn't begin speaking till 4. I don't, necessarily view that all that fascinating because I don't remember those early moments, right? But my parents, of course, have told me that, and they were fearful for me, as you might
Yeah.
suspect. I don't have kids of my own, but I know you've got children, and I know parents in the early years, if they're not speaking, can be fearful. So again, that's what I was told. I didn't speak till I was 4. I do recall vividly, though, going to a speech therapist up until my high school years. When I was in school, I would get pulled out of class once a week, and so by technicality, had a speech impediment. Also, don't look back on that in a way where I like operate with this deep, woe is me mentality. It was all I'd known at the moment. Was I embarrassed? You bet I was. I would turn beet red if I was even called on in class to speak. I hated ever speaking, reading out loud in class, speaking in public. It was my deepest fear because I couldn't enunciate my R. The R word was the one that I couldn't package it, right? So I was constantly working on that. And as a result of not being able to enunciate effectively, I would, shy away from certain words and couldn't put full sentences together, et cetera, from my recollection. So fast forward to into high school, I I go into high school, different school system than where I was for K through 8. And again, hated the idea of public speaking. My brother was he's 5.5 years older than me. So he'd already graduated from the high school that I was entering into. And he recommended that I take this speech course. It's just public speaking one with Janet Robb. She was a teacher who made a drastic impact on my life. She helped me believe in me before I ever believed in me. And now, Joe, I entered into ninth grade with a chip on my shoulder. I did terrible academically ninth grade, the worst I've ever done in my life. And that stems back to negative experience I had with my eighth grade principal, and which is what led me into education, et cetera. I mean, we don't have time to peel back all the layers of my story in my
Yeah.
life, but I take this public speaking course because I wanted to prove something to myself. I was terrible at it, but Janet Robb helped me. That's what I said. She believed in me before I believed in me. She made me feel empowered. She made me feel like I had a chance. So lo and behold, I took speech for 3 years as a public speaking course, 9, 10, and 11. And sometime in the creative writing course I took in high school, I said, I want to be a motivational speaker. I had this nudge inside of me to want to help and inspire. At 16 years old, I knew I wanted to empower and inspire. And again, that goes back to other varying points in my life, just in my upbringing. So I always thought that you had to quote unquote be somebody and 50 years old and have gray hair before you could ever be a motivational speaker. So my path through college was to study education. I got into education as a fifth grade teacher, as you know, because we taught at the same school.
Yeah.
And I was unfulfilled in that, not because I didn't love particularly like my colleagues, you all, the principal we had, the school. It was just, I felt like I was doing for children what what I didn't want done to me when I was a kid. And that is teaching people, what to think, how to think, and when to think it, and
Yeah.
kind of teaching for an exam. So I said, and I want to go live my dream. I want to see what I'm made of. I want to go out there and see what I've got and what I can do. And, I've watched my brother start a business, and my thought process was, and if he ever hears this, I've told him this publicly, to his face, so he won't be too surprised. But my thought process was like, well, he's no smarter than me. If he can do it, I can do it. And
No, so it goes with brothers. I got one too.
yeah, right. Right. So anyway, our naivety can be our greatest asset.
Yeah.
I started the business July 2013. By October of 2013, I'm sleeping in my car, broke, defeated. People in my life, I didn't want them to know how miserably I was failing, because I know you and I weren't close at the time, but you probably heard in the school, like, well, what's Adam going to go do? Because, I remember Dr. Burr asked, what are you going to do? And I had intended to be a commercial realtor, which ended up falling through. And because the gentleman I was going to work for, our value sets didn't align. So I didn't want anyone to know how miserably I was failing.
Yeah.
And,
I didn't
man,
know, honestly.
yeah.
We knew, we had left it, but honestly, and I don't mean to kind of cut you off. It was just that kind of new teachers, there's that year 1 through 5 that they leave the profession, but it was more so that you wanted to fulfill your passion and your dream at the time, I'm assuming.
That's right. Yeah, it wasn't anything like the educational system. I never got into education for money. So when I left, it's not like I was money hungry. I don't come from a business background. I don't, my desire was impact. I wanted to help people. And although I felt like I did an effective job of doing that as a teacher, I wanted to do it on a broader scale without the constructs of what I felt the school system was providing me.
I see. Now, how did you overcome, you're talking about, at this low point in your life and sleeping in your car, how did it change? What was that shift that to have this 180?
So many things, so many things. I'd be lying to you and to your audience if I said, oh, this was the moment, but I'm going to give you a collection of things that I can reflect on One is, so the first odd job I picked up was in October of 2013 because I finally, I began searching for a job probably I'd say late August, early September of that year. And I picked up a job at a country club, Wildcat Run in Estero, Florida. I made $10 an hour. I walked away from, and again, we weren't making a killing as teachers, but I walked away from a salaried position with benefits to now making $10 an hour scrubbing golf clubs at a local country club. And there was a man at that club who said to me, I began to share a little bit with certain people about my story and what I was going through. And he said, Adam, he said, you have got to turn your mess into your message. That one line right there, that's might to some be like, sound like a cliche. And I've since heard that line from thousands of people probably. So he probably stole it from a book or of sorts, but it resonated with me as a 23-year-old kid in that moment. That line gave me the courage to begin talking about my shortcomings. So rather than me hiding from this adversity, these failures as I saw them, I began embracing it. And there's human connection then that began to take form where I now would take the stage and speak to audiences. Because my first, 10, 15 speaking engagements, Joe, were, $250 or less, maybe an occasional 500 sprinkled in here. I was just trying to build credibility in the marketplace. So speaking for free at Rotaries, Kiwanis, Chamber of Commerce events, and as I'm delivering that message and I'm sharing this rawness, this authenticity with authenticity, I think people could feel. And then, people come up to me. Like I got a client from Lee Health, a large healthcare system based, near us in Southwest Florida, of course. And that came from a free event. He's like, I want you to come speak to my team. And so how did I get out? Momentum, but that one singular line gave me hope that this situation wasn't final. And, I'm a firm believer in momentum in life. You start stacking wins and all of a sudden you begin to get a little confidence in yourself. And then beyond that, from a business standpoint, I actually had now client logos and testimonials and videos that I could plaster on social media, on a website, so that when I was approaching other prospective clients, they saw that, oh, this is like an actual business. And then from there, it just, generated traction. And and one thing I'd like to just add to close the loop on this is that, you know, adversity is an inevitable part of life. And we go through ups and downs, peaks and valleys, trials and tribulations. So that's one of the things that I'm, with mental health that I am striving to do through Mindful Journey is to let people recognize that those who you might perceive to have it all together, what society might point to as quote unquote success, money, house, et cetera, that doesn't guarantee well-being, fulfillment, happiness. So we have to work on self every single day. And like to answer your question in totality, I'm a continued work in progress. Yeah, I'm super proud of where I've come from, what I've gone through, where I am, but it doesn't mean that like tomorrow is a promise free of adversity. Like there's every day there can be something. We have to have an awareness of how to get through so that the moments don't distract us from enjoying the present.
That's beautifully said. And I love that, that saying, turn your mess into your message. And that, like you said about it being like cliche and whatnot, that resonated with me as you were saying it. And I could feel that. And really, it's beautiful, honestly, because I myself, and others, we have our daily struggles or we have our setbacks. Like it's the old, turn your setback into a comeback kind of, saying and all those things. And I'm honestly, learning more about you and kind of leading up to this episode, in addition to things I did not know about you personally, it was very inspiring to kind of learn more about your story. And that was one of the things that I was really looking forward to with this evening's podcast, is having you share your story, because I know there's somebody out there listening and they're facing adversity in their life, and to know that there is hope and that things can turn around in your life, I think is so, so vital to oneself. Thank you for, being open and vulnerable and sharing that with us.
My pleasure, Joe. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I believe it's our responsibility to share our stories. We wear these masks every day, and fellow teachers that you interact with, those listening right now, like I try to be as raw and real with people as I can. And, you know, I believe it's our obligation to fellow humans because we wear these masks, right? And
Yeah.
and when we let off our mask, we let others in. And when we let others in, we can heal others, we can heal self, we can heal those around us. So vulnerability is essential.
Now, you did mention stacking some W's, right? Which I'm going to use that as a segue to something else that you do have experience in, and that is officiating. How does one go about becoming an NCAA official, Division I official, and your history with basketball? Can you tell us a little bit more about that experience?
Surely, yeah, deeply passionate about that too. That has been a journey in of itself. I don't tend to speak as much publicly about officiating. Like you and I have friends on Facebook. I very seldom, you'll never see me post a picture there of games because it's not right for the game. The game's about the players, et cetera. But happy to share in this context as it relates to my journey and what it's meant to me in my life because it is a deep, deep passion of mine and it has come with its own adversities. In 2014, I was invited to an MBA grassroots program. Was one of 48 officials throughout the country identified as a potential candidate for the NBA D League at the time, which is now the NBA G League for Gatorade League, and was in that system. It goes grassroots, mid-level, and elite. These are different like camp functions essentially, and you graduate each program there through in the summer and so I was in that from 2014, got released from that program in 2019, never ended up getting hired in the G League. But at the same time, I was pursuing the collegiate stuff and have been fortunate, to work. I worked three Division I conferences, the Atlantic Sun, the Big South, and the Southern. So they're mid-major conferences, but, highly competitive, highly scrutinized. It is extremely fun. People ask me all the time, like, why in the world would you want to do something where people are yelling at you for 2 hours? And, oddly enough, it makes me so happy inside. It challenges me in a way that other things haven't challenged me in my life because you have to be like super locked in. Talk about mindfulness. I'm a firm believer that, mindfulness is misinterpreted in our world. It's nothing more than just bringing your attention to the now on purpose. And when I'm refereeing, I can't be anywhere else because if I am, I'm going to miss every play, right? If I'm thinking about, you know, did I close the garage door? Did I leave enough food for my dog? Is my fiance upset at me because of something I said? Like you have to be locked in. So refereeing is super fun. I'm happy to give you more context. Do you want like more as it relates to the journey or the game or
Well, I guess I have to ask him. If it's obvious, I apologize. Were you a former basketball player yourself? Why basketball?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that. No, I'm actually bad at basketball.
Well, we have something in common.
Yeah, man. I am not good at basketball. In fact, my friends would probably say way less than average. So I got into it. I went to college, moved from Pittsburgh to Florida for college, went to Florida Gulf Coast University, which you, of course, are very familiar with being our backyard. And when I moved, I knew, I was moving way out of my comfort zone. That was by design. Again, peeling back the layers of my life because I've always had this kind of chip on my shoulder. I wanted to do things that are hard, do things that are difficult, get out of, I was trying to recreate myself, rewrite a new story for me from my childhood to move to Florida. But with moving to Florida, I was like, all right, well, I need to make money. Because I didn't come in from a family that could just dish me money and I need to
Yeah,
make friends.
have that in
So
common too with you.
yeah. So I got into at the time I was big into exercise, not like crazy like weightlifting stuff, but like just big into my health and but the gym was an important part of my life. So thought I was going to work at the gym. I was hunting down this guy, FGCU, who I thought ran the gym. And, turns out he ran intramural sports. I didn't know the difference. As a college kid, I just thought, the biggest, I literally like, he was really big, like physically wise. I was like, he must run the gym. And,
Yeah, makes
and
sense. Yeah.
yeah. And he's like, nah. And I literally chased him down. That's another story for another day. Or I probably pestered him for about 6 weeks till he finally gave me an interview. And he's like, hey, well, I can't hire you for the job that I think you want. He said, I can pass you along to the fitness folks, but I can't hire you to be a referee. Would you be interested? And he says to me, he said, we will probably start you, excuse me, in flag football and volleyball. We typically ease people into basketball because it's our hardest sport to referee. There's just you're refereeing your peers and it can get, confrontational, et cetera, et cetera. And me, knowing your audience knows how I am a little bit right now, like having that chip on my shoulder, I was like, no, I want to do basketball. Like you're going to tell me it's tough. That's the one I want to do. And man, I fell in love with it because of it brought out the competitive juices inside of me, not in an egoic way. This isn't like, I'm not a crazy egomaniac. I hope you've probably felt that from me and hope your listeners will,
Yeah.
but I always had this intrinsic motivation to prove more to me. And so, basketball refereeing is imperfect. We always have a saying that we strive for perfection, but settle for excellence because you're never going to get 100% of plays right, but we're constantly seeking it and we never get there. So you always have something to learn and grow upon.
That's something. And I could definitely see where it would be high pressure, high stakes with that, especially with the movement of the game. And I give you all the credit in the world. Years and years ago, I don't want to date myself too much, but probably about 15 years ago, I was like, I had this clever idea. Like, I'm going to do a flag football league out in Lehigh Acres, Florida at the time, because it's more like selfish. Like, I want to play. And there weren't many adult leagues, co-ed leagues, things like that going on at the time. So I'm like, I'm just going to start one up and I'll advertise, in the paper and, for signups and all that really before social media even got even bigger. And
Mm-hmm.
I would also then do double duty as an official sometimes with the men's league. And I had zero experience. Like I played football in high school. I understand the game of football, but officiating, wow, that was a totally different beast. And I would just
Mm-hmm.
get berated on the sideline, usually by the fans. I do. I was like, I am not cut out for officiating any sport. So to do it, and then to do it at a higher level that, you're doing now, kudos to you because I know my abilities, my limits, and I cannot hack it. And there's a reason why, you got, great, men and women out there officiating now, the sports they are. That's so thank you. Thank you for doing that. Some people like me are not cut out for it.
Well, you know what you are, I appreciate you saying that, but every job comes with its, challenges. And I, know when I do about education, thank you for what you do because that can be thankless in many regards too. Different in that, parents aren't maybe right in your face yelling at you, but, you definitely deal with complaints, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think every job has a little bit of that.
Yeah, I thank you. And definitely, setting a high stakes, high pressure. It seems even more how things are currently going today with the additional pressure of performance and, excellence and going kind of back to education in the classroom with the
Mhm.
standardized testing and all these things. And I previously had mentioned about, the statistics. Typically they say about within the first 5 years, 50% of teachers that are new to the profession, whether they be out of college or career changers, tend to leave the profession. So really like the last thing I'd like to touch on before we wrap up this episode is if you were to give any advice to a new teacher, what perhaps, being a new teacher, you have experience, in education and now and what you're doing in your career. And you were talking to a room full of new teachers, like it's new teacher training camp, and you were invited out to go and do motivational speaking or just field some Q&A with them.
Mhm.
Would you have any advice? What would you say kind of to a new teacher from your own experiences and where they perhaps if don't get discouraged or overwhelmed, within their first year?
Yeah. Powerful question. First thing that comes to mind, and there's so many, that we could touch on, but keeping your why front and center. I'm a firm believer. You asked me the question before of kind of what helped me through the adversities. And I told you there were a series of things I could point to there. And what I didn't mention then and want to mention now is that knowing why I have been doing what I'm doing has kept me going through adversities. And the why has to be bigger than you, in my opinion, because if it's just about a checkbox, if it's just about a paycheck, if it's just about recognition, if it's just about getting the golden apple, if it's just about, getting the promotion, becoming the superintendent, if that's what it's only about, then when adversity arises, I believe our best doesn't come out. So for new teachers in particular, on those days where they're getting discouraged, thinking that their work isn't worth it, or they aren't adding value, or they're not contributing, or there's a bunch of minutia they have to dig into and paperwork and performance standards, just, be introspective and get back in tune and in touch with why I got into education, and simply ask, why do I do what I do? Why did I choose this profession? And there's probably, I'm betting, Joe, within 95% of the teachers, these are my stats, there's no data behind this, no science, no proof, but betting 95% of teachers probably were impacted positively or negatively when they were a kid. And that's why they got an education, because they wanted to be for somebody else what somebody was for them or what somebody wasn't for them. And I think when we have something bigger than us driving us, it can help us sustain through the difficulties.
Well, I think that is a great message to share, especially with all educators, especially new educators, because it is easy. We call it in education the valley of despair. That first year, really the first couple of years, that there's that excitement. You get your offer or your school, and you're ready. You're ready to do this. You're gonna make a difference, and then reality kind of gives you a little smack, unfortunately, and like, whoa, what happened? At this like rude awakening of like, I was not prepared for this. Somehow you feel like you're on this island,
Hmm.
and which is hopefully you have a very strong team and strong administration that is very supportive. But it pretty much does show that you go into what we call survival mode, and then once again the valley of despair, and that happens, and then you eventually there's that light at the end of the tunnel. But I love what you said, kind of like the light focusing on why do you do this? Why are you here? The impact that you had or somebody had on you. So thank you. I think that's very profound, and it's important that teachers, veteran teachers, especially teachers that are new to the profession, hear something like that.
Hmm. No, my pleasure.
Yeah. Well, everyone that's listening to this episode, I want to just say once again, what an absolute pleasure. It has been talking to you, Adam. Those who want to learn more about Mindful Journey can visit Adam's website. It is www.journeymindful.com to learn a bit more. Once again, I highly recommend you look into it, learn more about Mindful Journey. Adam, once again, thank you for your time. It's been an absolute blast. I love talking with you, learning more about you, your story. And I could I'm leaving this episode feeling inspired, like ready to make a difference. And thank you, very much.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Joe. Thank you for having me. Thanks for the meaningful work you're doing in the world, both in the classroom and outside with your podcast and professional development work. I look forward to our paths staying connected and look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon. So thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, everyone, this is season 3, episode 3 of the No Frills Teacher Podcast, Mindful Journey, with my special guest, Adam James. You all have a good night. Take care.